but we'll get going. Okay, so a big hello to everyone who has joined us this morning. Again, I know I've been chirping away like a parrot, repeating myself. I do apologise for this morning's technical issue, but we are here now, just 10 minutes behind schedule. Hopefully it won't eat up too much of your time. So a big hello, thank you so much for joining our first International Women's Day webinar event. We are very, very, very excited about this one. Of course, it's International Women's Day today, the 8th of March. We've been planning this for a little while now. We've got all systems go, which is great. I just want to say a big hello and a big thank you to our guest speakers. You'll probably see on their screen, it has different names under their pictures, but that is not their names. They're just logged on as our colleagues. So we have Cecilia with us, Cecilia Mazzano from Women's International League for People and Freedom. And we have our lead speaker joining us today, our friend Meg Munn, former Minister for Women and Equality. Good morning, both.
Good morning.
Hi, and Cecilia. Yeah.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. We're really excited to get started, so I'm not going to waste too much time. So, of course, our session this morning is Achieving Gender Equality and Empowering All Women and Girls, Promoting SDG 5 in a COVID World. It's the first session of our International Women's Day series, and the theme this year is Choose to Challenge. We would love to hear from our participants throughout the full presentation, throughout the full session, asking questions. We want to make this engaging. We want you to shoot questions at our speakers, share your experiences and thoughts, but also share with us, what do you choose to challenge over International Women's Day? It's just a bit of food for thought. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear about your challenges. Christopher, if we could just go to the next slide, please, that would be absolutely fantastic. We'll get going. Thank you so much. Okay, so International Women's Day, for those that don't know too much about it, we'll just give you a quick background. International Women's Day takes place every year on 8th of March to celebrate the achievements of women all over the world. This global social movement dates back to 1908 in New York City, which started with a protest where women went out onto the streets to demand the right to vote, for shorter working hours and better pay. Since then, it has taken many forms, and today it's a global event that is supported by charities, NGOs, governments and academic institutions. It is a global day for celebrating the social, economic, cultural and political achievements of women, and marks a call to action for accelerating gender parity. Pre-pandemic times, a lot of special events would take place in towns and cities all over the world to celebrate International Women's Day, such as exhibitions, walking tours, shows, films, workshops, fun runs and so on. But this year, like a lot of organisations, Civil Service College will be contributing virtually to the movement, and we will be delivering to you 2 very special informational webinars this week, this one being our first. All International Women's Day events are designed to celebrate the role of women in society, to make us all take a step back and think about the progress that has been made over the years, but also about the changes that still need to take place in society, and of course across the world as well. We want to try and make this a fair and equal world for all to live in. So the first part of our International Women's Day series will be on the SDG 5 goal of achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. We will be looking at what are the sustainable goals. For those that have joined us today, if you don't know what they are, we'll give you a good background about that, specifically around SDG 5, how the UK is committed to delivering SDG 5, the bigger picture on an international perspective as well, and how COVID-19 will impact sustainable goal 5 by 2030. and we'll obviously want to hear from you, the audience members, and we want to obviously, have your questions. We'll throw them at our speakers, hear your experiences, thoughts, and we want to be challenged as well. So please don't keep your questions until the very end. Feel free to use the Q&A box at the top at any time, and I'm sure our speakers will gladly answer those as we go along. So for our first speaker, if we could just go to the next slide, please. So our lead speaker who we've eventually got on our platform this morning after a few attempts is our lead speaker, Meg Munn, former Minister for Women and Equality. Meg is an independent governance consultant working internationally on parliamentary processes, political party development, gender mainstreaming and women's leadership. She holds on a number of non-executive positions, including Pro-Chancellor and Deputy Chair of the Governors at Sheffield Hallam University and Independent Chair of the Church of England National Safeguarding Panel. From 2001 to 2015, Meg was a Member of Parliament in the United Kingdom. Whilst in government, she served as a Minister for Women and Equality and subsequently as a Minister in the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. Before entering Parliament, Meg had 20 years' experience in the social work profession, and she is a fellow of the Chartered Management Institute. She has designed and led training courses for the Civil Service College. So again, she's one of our friends. We've worked with her many times over the years, and it's great to have her again on board with us. And of course, the Inter-Parliamentary Union, UN Development Programme, the OECD and Global Partners Governments and the OSCE. So without further ado, I'm not going to take any more time from you, Meg. If we could go to the next slide and we'll get started. Thank you very much. Oh, you're on mute there, Meg.
Great, Andrea, and thank you for your warm welcome and the introduction. I'm going to run through quite quickly to get us to the Sustainable Development Goals, but it's quite important just to understand where they've come from. And as Andrea was saying, she recognised how long International Women's Day had been going, but also the issue of equality between men and women has been a global concern for many decades. So in the 1948 United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it proclaimed everyone's entitlement to all the rights and freedom without distinction of any kind, such as race, colour, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth or other status. So that equality was enshrined in the UN Declaration of Human Rights. But by 1979, there was a recognition that more needed to be done to take action in the area of women's rights, including in their participation in public and political life. And so in 1979, they developed the Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, which is usually called CEDAW for short. And most countries in the world have signed up and ratified that. So most countries have actually agreed that they need to do most of what's in that convention. So there are some aspects of it that they can talk about, which they can say we don't quite want to do that, but in general they've signed up to that. Then in 1995, there was a big meeting in Beijing, the UN World Conference of Women. It was actually the fourth one. And at that time, they said that the progress, despite CEDAW, despite the UN Convention, hadn't been sufficient. So they came up with the Beijing Platform for Action. And they looked and said, we really have to do more. Some progress has been made, but not enough. And so they produced that and countries signed up to it. Again, I actually wrote most of this document, which is about women's political participation, produced by the OSCE 20 years on from the Beijing Platform, and said, actually, still not enough progress has been made. In 2000, the Millennium Development Goals were set up. This was the UN coming together and saying, our world is still unequal, so let's have some Millennium Development Goals. And we'll just have a look in a moment at ones that they came up with around gender. And then in 2015, so the Millennium Development Goals ran from 2000 to 2015, and then from 2015 we've had the Sustainable Development Goals, which is our focus today. So if I can have the next slide, we'll just have a look at what the Millennium Development Goals said. So these were designed to meet the needs of the world's poorest people. So they didn't apply to the whole world, they just applied to what are known as developing countries, and they had a number of different goals. Millennium Development Goal 3, again often shortened to MDG 3, was to promote gender equality and empower women. And just as you'll see in the Sustainable Development Goals, alongside the goals there are indicators so that we know how well we're doing. So the ones that they chose for the Millennium Development Goals were ratio of girls to boys in primary school, where actually a huge advance has been made and was made over those 15 years. The share of women in wage employment in the non-agricultural sector, and then the proportion of seats held by women in national parliaments, which again, progress was made, but we're still a long way from parity. So let's now have a look at the Sustainable Development Goals in the next slide. So the difference about the Sustainable Development Goals is that they apply to all countries. So this is moving from a recognition that it's just about parity and equality, which of course is important, but actually our world is threatened by a lot more than that, and we need sustainability. So these were produced and approved by the UN member states on the 25th of September 2015, and they set out a whole range of issues that countries have to look at to develop what they're doing on that. And as you can see, if you can see it on, depending what device you're looking on, if you go to have a look at number 5, there we have the one on gender equality, and we'll go to the next slide and have a look in much more detail at this. So Sustainable Development Goal 5, the goal is to achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. And what we see is an increased range of areas covered by Goal 5. So and this is true of all the goals in the Sustainable Development Goals, there's more in it. So there's more target and more indicators. And what it sets out is that gender, for example, is gender equality is not only a fundamental human right, but a necessary foundation for a peaceful, prosperous and sustainable world. And if we had all day, we could probably go into all of those issues, because peace, involving women and girls in peace efforts is really important. Economic prosperity, but also sustainability. And some ideas are providing women and girls with equal access to education, healthcare, etc. Overall, there are 9 targets and 14 indicators for SDG 5, so you can see how much broader it is. And the targets specify the goal, so you've got the overall goal of a gender equality and empowerment, then you've got 9 targets underneath that, and 14 indicators, which are the way that the world aims to track whether these targets are being achieved. So go to the next slide, please. So here are our targets for SDG 5. So I'm not going to read all of those out because you can find these very easily in quick Google on the website, but we see a number at the beginning there. Well, obviously the overall one, end all forms of discrimination, but then issues about violence and harmful practices. There are ones which are socio-economic, around recognising value of unpaid care and domestic work, and further down, economic reforms to give women rights to economic resources. We've got the one which is always the one that I'm interested in, which is about full and effective participation and equal opportunities for leadership. A lot of the work that I do for the organisations Andrea read out earlier is about empowering women in many different countries to be leaders and to ensure that more women are able to be elected to parliaments and local councils. there's one which you could say is about people's private lives, but in effect, it's often public policy which enables people to make those choices, ensure universal access to sexual and reproductive health and reproductive rights. And I'm saying people, not just women, because obviously one of the things that we understand is that the discrimination against women also has negative impacts on men as well. So it's important that that we recognise that gender equality is about men and women. And then again, we've got issues about empowerment. So can we go to the next slide? I'm not going to go through all the targets and indicators today. You can look these up yourself, but this is just to highlight a couple so you can get an idea of what we mean by targets and indicators. So end all forms of discrimination against all women and girls everywhere. And the indicator for that is whether or not legal frameworks are in place to promote, enforce and monitor equality and non-discrimination on the basis of sex. And the kind of things that you would look at to see whether that was the case or not would be, do women have equal rights to pass on their nationality, for example, to children? What are the property rights? Are they the same for men and women? What are the marriage and divorce rights? A whole range of issues that you might cover there. 5.2, of course, is extremely important: to eliminate all forms of violence against all women and girls in the public and private spheres, including trafficking and sexual and other types of exploitation. And the indicators we've got shown here are the proportion of ever partnered women and girls aged 15 and older subjected to physical, sexual or psychological violence by a current or former intimate partner in the previous 12 months by form of violence and by age. And this is really important, and I do a lot of work in countries who are perhaps trying to pass a law on domestic violence for the very first time, and you always get the sense that they think that we in the UK have got this sorted. And when you actually talk about the number of women on average, it's still at around 2 women a week, and we know, I'm sure we'll come on to this, the issues of domestic violence during the COVID period. We haven't got it sorted. There's still a long way to go. We have the other indicator there, which also is around recording those issues. And of course, if you don't record it, you can't report on it. So that's a whole another area we could cover, which takes us to the question of how is the UK set up to report back on how it's doing on the SDGs, and obviously specifically SDG 5. So next slide, please. So the way that we are doing this in the UK involves a number of different parts of government. The Cabinet Office and the Foreign and Commonwealth and Development Office have responsibility for policy implementation. The Cabinet Office more focused around the UK, the Foreign Office more on work overseas, and as you'll probably be aware, some of our investment in terms of international development spending is on assisting and supporting other countries to work on their SDGs. But more importantly, in terms of the UK, it isn't just one bit of government. Each UK government department has embedded the goals in its annual single departmental plan, which says what they're going to do to support the delivery of that. It's the Office for National Statistics that is responsible for monitoring the data. But as you'll be aware, often it's not only data that's important, we need narrative, we need qualitative information as well. And I love this terminology. Countries are asked to do voluntary national reviews, so they don't have to do one, but there's quite a lot of pressure to do one. So it's kind of, I think, voluntary in inverted commas, as it were. And the UK produced its first voluntary national review in 2019 and presented it to the UN in what's called a high-level political forum on the 16th of July. Okay, so if we can have the next slide, please. One of the things that is really important is the role of parliaments, and this is core to what I do with quite a lot of my time, which is working with parliaments on monitoring international conventions. Quite often I'm talking about CEDAW, but also the Sustainable Development Goals are hugely important. And the Interparliamentary Union, that is one of the oldest transnational organisations. It brings together all the parliaments in the world, and it's produced self-assessment tools. So it helps parliaments to ask the questions, who's looking at what's happening? And I've worked in countries to support this. I worked in Djibouti a couple of years ago. Djibouti, it's a small country on the Horn of Africa, but they've done some fabulous work on increasing the number of women in Parliament. They were the biggest increase in the year, I think it was 2019, was Djibouti, so they did some great work on that, but they're also looking at how do they, as a parliament, ask those questions. Members of Parliament are elected to represent people and to hold government to account, so parliaments are fundamental and crucial ways in which these questions can be asked. So what has the UK Parliament done? You'll have heard about select committees, and you'll have seen sometimes on television when you get the more dramatic ones. Most of the time the work of select committees isn't dramatic, but it's fundamentally important. It's the unlike the chamber, the Parliament, you know, the House of Commons chamber, where people often just seem to be shouting at each other and scoring political points. In committees you see members of Parliament right across the political spectrum working together to test out these issues with government and to really say to them, what are you doing on this? So the UK Parliament, there's committee reports, and you can go on the Parliament website and download these and read what they said. So back in March 2017, the Women and Equalities Committee took the opportunity to look at the issues and came up with a number of recommendations. So this is where Parliament can really bite on what government's doing. So they said, for example, that the Government Equalities Office should ensure that the key SDG principle of leave no one behind is fully embedded in its revised single departmental plan. Sounds like a lot of jargon, but basically it says this must not be forgotten. It has to be there. It's not about what are we doing and what are we going to do for women as well. Women aren't an add-on. They should be central to all of these things. And again, another example would be from their recommendation to ensure universal access to sexual and reproductive health and reproductive rights, as agreed in the Beijing Platform for Action, must be included within the Department for Health's plan. So again, really focusing on what are you doing about this. The International Development Committee also looked at the issues in relation to the wider world in 2019 and said it's unambiguous that a global rollback on women's rights is an important challenge. And at that point, so in 2019, they were highlighting the issue of access to sexual and reproductive health and rights in Northern Ireland. And as we know, while the Northern Ireland Assembly was suspended, the UK government legislated for abortion rights in Northern Ireland, which are now again the subject of challenge. So we can't in the UK sit on our laurels. We also know that there are debates. The House of Lords had one, for example, and there's also an all-party parliamentary group. If you've never heard of these, they're great things. They're the proof that a lot of work by members of parliament happens across political parties, and there's one that specifically brings together MPs and members of the House of Lords on the Sustainable Development Goals. Quickly on to the next slide, because it's nearly time I shut up and let Cecilia come in.
We've just had a question through from a lady called Bev. Is there a requirement for local government to embed SDG 5?
Yes, local government is involved in this, and there are a number of local authorities who have actually got plans and documents around this. So is it a requirement? I guess it's not a requirement as such. There's not been any legislation as such which says that. But as we know, in the UK and indeed in many countries, local authorities deliver so many of the services. So they have to comply with equalities legislation. So the most recent was the Equality Act 2010, which again requires them to do certain things. So gender equality, equality impacts assessment, etc., are in legislation, and they have to comply with that. But without them looking at the Sustainable Development Goals, it's difficult to see how we would achieve all of the indicators that are there. So absolutely really important question. And if I had slightly more time, I perhaps could have given some examples of some councils are doing a great job around Sustainable Development Goals and actually have that at the heart of what they're doing. So here are some examples of what came out of the Voluntary National Review, draft domestic abuse bill, women number increased, 32% of MPs elected in 2017, that's up slightly after the 2019, 173 more senior positions than before in the senior civil service, and investment in programs to increase girls' engagement in science, technology, energy and engineering and math. So you can see it really is an extremely wide way. And next slide, please. And so here are just, I know there's a little bit difficult to see, but here, for example, is information that's been collected by the Office for National Statistics, the percentage of women who experienced partner abuse in the last 12 months. Obviously, only that which is reported, and we know a lot goes underreported. And as you can see, it starts in 2005, 2004, 2005, and it appears to be going down and then up and down a little bit. Has dropped by 2016, 17, but then we're seeing a rise again, and obviously we're concerned about that. So, and I think, if I'm right, that gets me to the end of my slides. I hope that's given you sort of a little bit of the history and the wider context, and I'm delighted to hand over to Celia.
If we just go to the next slide, please. Oh.
There was another another graph, so I'd obviously forgotten to write that one down. So as you can see, percentage of managerial positions held by women is going up, but it's slow, isn't it? That's I think with most things in relation to gender, it changes, but far too slowly. Thank you.
Thank you, Meg.
Oh, another one. And here again, we can see number of women using sexual and reproductive health services going down, which again probably relates to services being closed and reduced, and think about the kind of impact that has. Okay, I'm going to have my fingers crossed. I think that
we'll soon find out.
Yeah. Okay.
And if we could just go to the next slide, please. Okay, thank you very much. So yeah, well, any questions for Meg, please just pop them into the chat box. You know, we don't have to actually wait until the end, but I'm sure we'll have some questions for Meg in a little bit later on. But just to introduce our next guest speaker, we have Cecilia Passaniti-Mazzano here from the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. So big hello to you, Cecilia. So just to give you a bit of information about Cecilia, Cecilia is a member of the Executive Committee of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom UK, and has worked with the organisation to promote the participation of members in campaigning and research activities to increase the breadth of views and perspectives within and outside the, I want to say, WILP network. Her campaigning in WILP focuses primarily on women, peace and security, and the inclusion of the WPS agenda in defence, security and peacekeeping matters, and follows on from research on peacekeepers' accountability for sexual exploitation and abuse, and the WPS agenda silences on the issue. Alongside her work at WILP UK, Cecilia is a research assistant for gender, migration and development at the GCRS Gender, Justice and Security Hub. Prior to joining the Hub, Cecilia worked in Senegal on women's economic rights and access to sexual and reproductive health services. A big hello and welcome, Cecilia. We're excited to hear from you. So I'll leave it to you now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Meg, for the wonderful and very brief history of the SDGs. That was very impressive. My intervention follows on exactly from that, because we, in the UK and around the globe, we've seen a rollback in women's and girls' rights in all parts of our lives during the pandemic. And so in this talk, I will we can move on from the next slide, maybe. There we go. So I will talk briefly about the work that we've been doing around this issue at WILF, and then what WILF's sort of build back better rules should be or are for policymakers around the globe. So for organizations such as WILF, who are made up and work with women, this rollback on women's and girls' rights was not an unforeseen consequence of the pandemic. We had been saying that the systems in place in ordinary times were too fragile and not far-sighted enough to withstand a global lockdown. The SDGs are a lighthouse for each and every one of us, but it was troubling how countries were not following and not acting fast enough to actually achieving them. We know from the most recent gender statistics that gender equality at the current pace will be achieved in 99 years. So anyone that's on this call is unlikely to see it unless we get working really quickly. So to investigate these growing inequalities and failures towards women and girls at WILF, we launched a research series which aimed at covering multiple regions and countries to research the key issues that women and girls were facing in those particular countries. And of course, all of these countries have specific fallacies and pre-existing issues, and the research is still ongoing. We only have 12 countries that you can see pinpointed there in the map. But there are some common trends. Firstly, common among many countries, we've seen it at the very beginning of the pandemic, particularly in the global south, was the inadequate communications about the virus and preventative measures. Now you'll ask, how does this impact women? When we know that, for instance, in the majority of global south countries, only around 30% on average of women have access to stable internet connections. Now, what does that mean? That means that there are repercussions such as not knowing about the virus, not being able to protect themselves from it, social isolation, a deeper digital education divide, and the inability to contact medical facilities and report abuses, which Meg has mentioned in her speech. And another consequence, quite deep consequence of the lack of access to the internet is financial exclusion. In India, for instance, around 176 million women lack what is called a PMJDY, which is their form of the universal credit. So they could not access any financial relief options during the pandemic. The inability to access information then also led to not knowing about PPE, protective equipment, and the importance of masks until much later in the pandemic, when infection rates and death rates were already skyrocketing. Speaking of PPE, just like in the UK, other countries had limited stocks of protective equipment for medical staff and essential workers. Although both women and men working in this sector were exposed to the virus, women healthcare workers have made up a higher share of infected healthcare workers because they occupy around 75% of all healthcare workers. And this 75% is pretty much stable across countries both in the global north and in the global south. Usually they work in lower status jobs, which expose them to more possibly infected people and possibly infected spaces. And this has signified that infection rates amongst these groups have been higher. Likewise, the absence of a safety net, both PPE, but also paid sick leave, furlough and other economic schemes have hit workers in the informal sectors and migrant workers. We know, for instance, that in Angola, more than 72% of the population rely on the informal sector to live, and the absence of a robust safety net has left many of these in dire straits. Now, normally, before the pandemic, NGOs, civil society organizations would do the work that sometimes the state is unwilling or unable to do. Of course, because of lockdown measures, this was pretty much impossible. And we know at WILV that we had to move everything online, and so did many other organizations. Something that particularly affected women and girls in virtually all countries is the lack of recognition of unpaid care labor. Care labor is anything that goes from cleaning the house, taking the children to school, caring for elderly relatives, and has fallen even more on women than it was before. Both in Morocco and Japan, so two very different countries, we found that roughly 40% of the free time of women is dedicated to domestic work, whereas only 5% of men's free time is dedicated to domestic work. And these figures only increased during lockdown, where with the majority of female sectors, such as retail, hospitality, and wellness, seeing the highest layoffs. Many women, because they were earning less prior to the pandemic compared to their male counterparts, have also decided to quit their jobs if there was a need to homeschool children or, again, take care of relatives. And the ILO has estimated that 49% of these women will not return to formal employment in the aftermath of the pandemic, which, of course, will have repercussions both on the economy and on achieving SDG 5 and all other SDGs as well. Furthermore, stay-at-home orders, which happened in most, if not all, countries, have created what the UN Secretary General called the shadow pandemic. This is domestic and gender-based violence have increased. France saw a 32% jump in domestic violence reports in just over a week from the beginning of the pandemic. Since the beginning of the pandemic, Lithuania observed over 20% more domestic violence report compared to the same 3-week period, again at the beginning of the pandemic, compared to 2019. Curiously, in the early days of lockdown, countries, especially in the global south, saw a steep decrease in reports to police and appropriate NGOs. This, however, did not come as a shock to any of the experts that work on this, because we knew that the proximity of the abuser in the family meant that protection in the least well-meaning of senses, and women could not phone the usual hotlines that are available. Furthermore, curfews and lockdowns did not allow for women to go out as much as usual. Governments were often slow to act, and when they did, the messaging was sometimes hilarious at best, with Malaysia, for instance, saying that women should not nag their husbands as a strategy to combat domestic violence. Other NGOs and governments responded quite promptly. We have Chile, which saw a massive increase in calls to the violence against women orientation line, 63%. They instituted a Mask 19 initiative where women would go to pharmacies and ask for a Mask 19 to seek help. However, journalists have investigated this, and a journalist tried several pharmacies in Santiago where they all replied, "We are out of Mask 19, which is not even a real medical mask." So that was, again, quite frustrating for many, and dangerous for others. Healthcare staff was not only unable to help in pharmacies, but also in hospitals. We've seen that throughout the countries we researched, sexual and reproductive services, both in hospital and at home, were starkly reduced, and FGM increased. Though I should mention that South Sudan finally abolished FGM by law, so that is a big win. So whilst Poland was certainly the country that cut back the most on, for instance, abortion rights of women, many countries reduced access to abortion as it was not considered an essential service. Again, should say that Argentinian women finally gained the right to abortion earlier this year, so that is a win as well. Another issue in SRH, sexual and reproductive health, is feminine hygiene products, which were not included in many relief packages to marginalized communities because, again, not deemed essential. And the prices of feminine hygiene products in countries where they are usually lacking anyway, skyrocketed. In Zimbabwe, a pack of sanitary pads went to cost around $100 to $200 a pack, which is just amazing. However, we must acknowledge again that there are some positives. The UK abolished the tampon tax, and Scotland and New Zealand had big steps around free period products. So again, positives and negatives, but we try to see the silver lining somewhere. In terms of education, another big part of the SDG 5, education for girls. We know that, I mean, in the UK it happened everywhere else in the world. Most kids were left at home from school. But what we've seen, again, in terms of gender inequality, is that the digital divide, so access to digital tools between girls and boys, grew and grew during the pandemic. The closure of schools in Bangladesh, for instance, meant that 19.5 million students were out of education. However, whilst boys are mostly all back in school now, the majority of girls have not been allowed back. This is not just in Bangladesh. It happens in lots of different places for many reasons. Girls have fallen back into traditional gender roles, working in the home and taking care of the siblings or, again, other family members. Families where parents have lost their jobs and managed to scrape together the money to send just fewer children to school have preferred sending boys over girls. And in many countries, early marriage was seen as the most adequate response, with the UN estimating around 10 million additional girls at risk of child marriage than pre-COVID times. This is again due to school closures, economic stress, service disruptions, parental deaths due to the pandemic, and unwanted teen pregnancies, which again have risen again after a steady period of decline pre-pandemic. So we see that these are the common trends. You can see on the green column that there are country-specific or region-specific trends, which I'm happy to talk to, but I won't go on about now. So we can move on to the next slide quite quickly. So the question is, how do we build back better and get back to our task to achieving SDG 5 by 2030? Again, 2030 is quite a feat, but my main focus today is to talk about the post-COVID-19 feminist recovery, as we call it at WILF. However, you can see again in the green slides that we need to converge this feminist recovery to environmental thinking. And this is essential not only to achieving SDG 5, but all other SDGs as well, which, as you can probably remember from graphs that you've seen, are all interlinked. So I'll speak to the red column, but you can see the green one as well. Now, WILF was part of the campaigning efforts to achieve the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, WPS for short, at the UN. This agenda affirmed the important role of women in the prevention and resolution of conflicts and peace-building initiatives. Now, why am I mentioning this agenda? Because this agenda was always conceived to be used in the aftermath of conflict. And we've seen that the rhetoric of the pandemic has been quite war-related. So post-pandemic recovery has the potential of using this agenda as both a benchmark and a guideline to how do we go about relief and reconstruction. As I mentioned before, and I will go into it again, but we've seen the shortcomings that countries' strategies had in pre-pandemic policies. So how do we go about changing this completely? Well, firstly, we have to include traditionally marginalized communities and groups. They were historically excluded from decision making, but they experience firsthand the fulsome effect of the lack of economic, social, and cultural rights protections. These are women, but these are also Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and they must be part of the solution during and post the pandemic, as they have not been before. Going back to the first pillar of women, peace, and security, which is prevention, we need to ask ourselves who participates in the planning, design, and rollout of programs. An example of this is, again, NHS workers. They're very, very near and dear to us in the UK, but they have been defined in monetary terms, whilst we now deny the appropriate wages to those who are responsible for delivery and care of social cohesion in this country. And so in the recovery plan, they need to be made essential workers still, and not go back to being considered lower class workers. Second, states must address the failure of the systems of prevention and protection of foreseeable harms, including gender-based violence and child abuse. Women face the greatest dangers for people they know. Around 58% of women globally who are killed die at the hands of intimate partner or family members. And we knew this, as Meg said, from the CEDAW in 1979. This is not news to us. Again, we've seen the rise in domestic violence in this and other countries during the lockdown. Why weren't there systems in place that we were able to access even during an emergency situations? This cannot be achieved. The protection and prevention cannot be achieved with austerity measures. We know from the CEDAW Committee and the European Institute for Gender Equality that, especially in the UK, which is a country that has had austerity in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis, this has disproportionately a negative impact on women. And therefore, these measures should be avoided in the national recovery plans across the globe. Third, we need to think about what the political economy would look like as we move out of the pandemic. As countries around the world have been releasing their budgets, it is clear that we will see an attempt to return to the pre-pandemic state of affairs, thus increasing the inequalities which led us here in the first place. So again, who do we make essential workers? Are we going to be devaluing healthcare and the healthcare and care sector again as the valued unskilled women's work? Or are we going to make them, as the Women, Peace and Security agenda states, a survivor-centered approach central in our recovery plans? And lastly, and then I'll stop, we need to examine what went right and where. What early data is telling us is that countries that have seen far fewer deaths were those who have responded by not using warlike strategies, but instead have been practical, sensible, honest, decisive, and compassionate with this emergency. These countries are often led by women. New Zealand, Iceland, Finland, Germany, Taiwan, Norway, Denmark. I'm aware that the debate around this will usually lead to the question of, are women simply more compassionate? I think this is not the right question. For me, the right question is that the social and cultural context in which these women are leaders is one where society is less fragmented, inequalities are not so stark, they're still there, not so stark, and people's well-being is a priority. This is not a definitive answer, but that data speaks for itself. For too many people, far too many people have now experienced firsthand the consequences of what unresolved inequality and misguided social reproduction lead to, and starting as soon as yesterday, their voices must be heard. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cecilia. Lots of really interesting figures and statistics and information fed out to us there, so thank you both so much. If we could just move on to the next slide. Now, I'm going to leave some questions to the audience. Please do feel free to ask Cecilia and Meg any questions that you do have, and just post it into the box. There was a question that popped up, Meg, earlier on in relation to when we talked about local government. So obviously, yes, local government does have the Equality Act 2010 to respond to. However, should there be some joint working by central and local government on this goal?
Yes, absolutely. Two useful things hopefully to say on local government. Firstly, the Local Government Association, which is the organisation which brings local councils together, has produced some really excellent guidance on what local councils can do to embed SDGs in their work. In terms of how national and local government should work together, that should be through the relevant department, which I think these days is called Housing, Community and Local Government, and their plan, this single development plan that we talked about, does include information about working with local government. I was trying to have a quick look while Cecilia was presenting, but not wanting to spend too much time on it, looking as to whether they specifically reference supporting local government with SDGs, but that's where it should happen. Just to say, my final slide, which we skipped over because I was keen to really get on to Cecilia's talk, gives a summary of some of the impact on women of COVID in the UK, and its highlights from the Women Inequality Select Committee on Equal Impact. It's not a long report, it's well worth again just having a look at that. And again, that sense which I think really came through in what Cecilia said there all the time is that people just aren't thinking about women. I mean, the idea that you can put together emergency packs for people without sanitary products is just kind of, you know, you ever met a woman, you know, sort of, it's just incredible. So really, you know, some of the things that the government's doing, talking about shovel ready products, it isn't, you know, women who are working in those industries, you know, it's kind of all the sort of things that they're just absent, which really does speak to that hugely important thing of you have to have women at the table involved in these discussions all the time, because a woman would say, what about the sanitary products? You know, whatever.
Yeah, and just on the back of that, we had someone ask, what would you say are the key obstacles from the pandemic that will affect the progress made in the UK?
Oh, that's a nice essay question, isn't it?
Don't mean to put you on the spot.
Well, I mean, all sorts of things are going to happen because there's all sorts of impact. We know already that women suffer in terms of getting into key positions in the labour market, for example, because so many women have to take time out to have children, even if you only just take maternity leave, that just the juggling with kids and coming back, that, you know, some research done 20 odd years ago now, probably by Sheffield Hallam University, found that 50% of women were working below their skill level, often because they compromise what they do at work to manage the family issues. So now what we've had often women stepping out of the labour market or stepping back because they've been homeschooling, all of this sort of things. I mean, I'm pleased to say when I'm on calls, I often see men also juggling with the childcare now. So I think it is getting more equal. But all of those kind of issues, which you never get back, and once you've been out, you're not seen as being within as up to date and relevant. You haven't got the length of service, so you don't get into those positions. You therefore earning less. You pay less into your pension. So it's a lifelong penalty, and until we recognise that the kind of abilities to juggle and manage all of that actually equip women for those jobs when there's a lot of stress and you've got a lot of things to deal with, and you don't need to be time serving, it's always going to have an impact.
Absolutely, yeah. And I guess this could be a question for Cecilia. And what can we do as a global collective, a global society, to promote SDG 5? What can we do together, perhaps even as individuals, for people that live in the UK, to get the word out there that this isn't just in the UK, this is a global movement, this is something that's happening and needs to be done by 2030?
Yeah, well, that's a very important question. On an individual level, we can do well, as much as your abilities allow. You can join organizations that work on the SDGs. You can keep yourself informed on the SDGs. There are constant reports coming out, too many to read, so probably around these issues. So on the individual level, I think that the biggest thing is to be informed and involved in organizations that promote these SDGs, promote the intersections between them, especially because what the UN has often been accused of, and rightfully so, is of working in silos. And so who works on the environment doesn't think about women, and who works on women doesn't think about race, and all these silos are very real. So working at the intersections of these, which is why I'm very, very happy about the APPG on the SDGs, because that does exactly that. On the level of government, well, I can't speak for global governments in the global south because I'm not from there. I don't have that knowledge, that experience on them, but being from a different country than the UK, as my accent probably tells you, and having lived in a couple of different countries in Europe, what is key is how we spend our aid money. And I'm going to touch on something really, really current with ODA and foreign aid funding in the UK, which has been reduced by 0.2% from 0.7 to 0.5 in the current budget. And that is, it seems nothing. It seems like nothing, but it is loads of money that is now being taken away from foreign aid projects, which are away from the UK. I come from the activist background, so I will say it is a way for the UK to try and mend the harms done during its colonization times, but also on a very real level, it has helped many, especially girls and women, getting out of poverty. DFID is and now FCDO was one of the best and well respected government departments on the matter, and it is just a pity and completely wrong to reduce spending in that form.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Meg, I know that a lot of your work covers more of the international side of things. Was there anything that Cecilia picked up on that quite interesting to you, or anything that you wanted to add on that?
Not specifically. I'd actually just like to add on to what Cecilia said there about what you can do individually. A much unused thing that you can do individually is write to your local MP. I go on and on about this, but one of the things, I was a political activist for 20 years before I got to Parliament, and it was only once I was in Parliament that I really grasped the absolute importance of local MPs and how they are so rooted in their communities. And why that's important, because every single person who's on this call who lives in the UK has a member of parliament that you can write to. I'd say don't overdo it. Don't send standard letters, but if you take the time and get your friends and colleagues to take the time to write, it makes a difference. I mean, I'm just waiting at the moment to see how quickly the government are going to have to do something about the 1% rise for nurses, because it's big in the news. People will be writing to their MPs, and the more that happens, the more MPs then go into the chamber, regardless of whether they're, you know, part of the government party or other ones, and say, I'm getting all these letters and all these people. Don't make it a standard one. I mean, email's so easy now, you know, find out who your MP is from the parliamentary website and just send them a letter saying why. If you write on every single issue, they'll ignore you. But if you just write 3 or 4 times a year on something that really matters to you, it will make a difference, I can promise you.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important note to leave this session on to our viewers. I know that we've got quite a few people logged on right now watching. Yeah, if there's anything that you can take away from this session, please do speak to your local government, whoever it is, reach out to them. This is what International Women's Day is all about. It's about raising voices, raising awareness, and I mean, this session's been a perfect starting point, hopefully, for people watching to do so. I'm very conscious of timing. I just want to say a massive thank you both to Meg and Cecilia for joining us this morning, and apologies about any technical glitches that did happen earlier on to our audience members. I don't know if there's anything else that Meg and Cecilia you'd like to add to finish from.
No, just to wish everybody a happy International Women's Day, and keep working for gender parity.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. If we could just quickly go to the next slide, link up with us. Our social media handle is on there, CS College, or Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram. This will be posted on YouTube. We will send you all the slides and the video as well. Thank you again, Meg and Cecilia. Happy International Women's Day to you and to our members. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.